and it's something that's been going on for about 30 years, is the incident involving Daniel Morgan, who was a private investigator who was murdered in a pub car park back in the end of the 1980s. He was found with an axe in his head. And we've effectively had 30 years of trying to get answers, which has been very, 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 very difficult. And the family, obviously, themselves have gone through so much stress trying to get the Metropolitan Police to investigate properly. And it now transpires, although for many people they've suspected it for a long, long time, that actually the Metropolitan Police and organised crime were in bed together on this case. And for me, it has overtones with the Stephen Lawrence inquiry in 1993, which again led to a report in 1999 condemning the Met Police, in that case for institutionalised racism, in the Daniel Morgan case, institutionalised corruption. And it's, again, another sickening blow to the torso of civilised society, that for so long we have allowed the people who are supposed to be protecting us and serving us to be doing the exact opposite. Now, for those who don't know too much about the details of Daniel Morgan, it's really worth just going online and investigating, because the last 2 or 3 days, specifically because the report has come out, have gone into extensive detail about what happened and a lot of the issues in and around the case, and certainly looking into how the Metropolitan Police have let down not only the family, let down an official murder inquiry, but let down the British public yet again. Whether, of course, they will be held to account properly, bearing in mind that a lot of the officers are either dead or retired, is another issue. Whether we will learn too much from it, again, is a big question, especially given that the institutionalised racism findings of the Macpherson report following Stephen Lawrence, although initially seemed to reflect a change of culture within the Met, I think in the last few years, again, we've started to get very, very worried. And obviously Black Lives Matter is a key issue here, but very, very worried about the nature of British policing when they interact with certain demographics within society. The panel said here that Mr. Morgan's family has suffered grievously because his killers have never been brought to justice, and the Met Police had failed to acknowledge its many failings over the 34 years since the murder. Concealing or denying failings for the sake of the organisation's public image is dishonesty on the part of the organisation for reputational benefit and constitutes a form of institutional corruption, the panel said. It goes on, also says Scotland Yard has previously admitted corruption was a debilitating factor in the original investigation. So there's a whole range of things. You can go onto Dorset Eye, but you can go onto many news websites that will give you the detail of what happened and why it happened and the conclusions as to what should happen now. But again, Tom, it's just an horrific case that we've almost grown to expect, haven't we? You know, it's at least quite a sour taste, because on the one hand you expect so much more, ideally, but on the other hand, pragmatically, it doesn't really surprise us anymore.
No, it's a sad indictment of the situation both then and now, looking at the cases to do with the Met over so many years, over decades. And it's not. I'm not in any way anti-police. I have a number of friends and ex-young people that I've worked with that work for Dorset Police, or have worked for Dorset Police, who are outstanding police officers, care passionately about their communities, work incredibly hard to bring criminals to justice and to make our community safer and better. And they're very, very decent people, and they're not racist, etc. And there are police officers like that up and down the country.
Yes.
And you know, good for them. And we need them. However, it's clear that certain police forces, in particular the Met, have a long history now of corruption, of institutionalized racism, and of cover-ups. And we've certainly seen that with the Met Police. There's been this Daniel Morgan case, obviously on the back of the Stephen Lawrence murder inquiry, botched or you know, deliberately appalling and corrupt murder inquiry. We've seen it more recently with things like, you know, the policing of the Sarah Everard vigil, and other things too. And well, there was also it's recently emerged that the teacher who was murdered, Blair Peach, who was almost certainly murdered by the police at an anti-racist rally back in the, I think it was the 80s.
Early 1980s, yeah, 81.
Yeah.
80.
And it's recently emerged that his partner and other people, but his girlfriend was spied upon for years and years and years after the murder by the police, which is just appalling and should, you know, obviously shouldn't be happening. So, I mean, yeah, and we hear that, you know, Cressida Dick was directly, you know, was criticised by the report's findings yesterday. Was criticised, sorry, a few days ago, was criticised for directly, you know, preventing the inquiry from getting to the facts. This is the chief of the Met Police, and again, you know, facing massive criticism for doing something that's, I can't think of another word for it other than say that it's corrupt. And she's now responsible for sort of responding to this. And of course, all she'll do is cover things up again. So, I mean, yeah, there's the Independent Police Complaints Commission when things go wrong, but so often we see that it's the police themselves that are policing themselves. And they've shown over the years that when things go wrong, they haven't really got much of an incentive or desire to correct things, especially within the Met, I would say. So yeah, very concerning. Once again, it was clear that, you know, at that time during the 80s, both in this case with Daniel Morgan and with Stephen Lawrence, it seems like a lot of Met police were far too close to organised crime. Yes. And that seemed clear with both cases. And that's obviously a concern. Whether it's still like that now, we don't know. We might hear about it in another 20, 30 years that yes, right now they still are, who knows? But certainly there are still problems within the Met Police and the way that they're policing. And of course, some of those issues come from the Home Office. You know, some of the way that the police, you know, is down to the government and the Home Office and the Home Secretary. So, and certainly in terms of issues like, you know, policing protests and things.
So what hope do we have if
yeah.
And what hope do we have if we have Priti Patel as a Home Secretary? She stalled the publication of the report in May, which obviously led to a lot of angst amongst the family. So it wasn't a good start. It wasn't like a platform of her being conciliatory and coming out and saying things positive and being prepared to be critical. It's all that straight into that, you know, defensive mode, which means, you know, the family are already uptight and tense. When the report actually does come out, it's not an easy process for them in the first place. It's made it much, much more difficult by the types of Priti Patel who do not seem to be working for the public at large, apart from appealing to populist voices that want to scapegoat and hate others all of the time because they just want the votes. And without those votes, they wouldn't be in power.
Yeah, that's all that Priti Patel and the Conservatives seem interested in, rather than rectifying things that are wrong in government, in society, in policing. They're not interested in that. They're only interested, as you say, in populist sound bites that get them votes. And our country is not improving because of that. It's arguably going down the toilet because of that.
And defining the term populist, people will come back and say, well, that means they're popular. No, it doesn't. It means that they are very much without substance. It's like looking at the surface of the sea, and saying, oh, isn't that beautiful, without understanding everything that's going on below the surface, all the complexities. And so just seeing the light bouncing off the top of the water in the sea, yes, it's going to give you an impression, but you go further down where the light becomes less and less and less, it's darker. And that seems to be very much Western societies. It seems to be very much the nature of any hierarchical society, that you can create an image that we call populism on the surface, but just below the surface, and obviously when you go much, 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 much deeper, it becomes something very, very, very different. And there's no doubting at all that at the moment this particular government are trying to create the impression that the things that they do are going to create this beautiful texture on the surface, but they're not willing to admit what lies beneath, and it is scary.